Ooh, a lot of microphones. I think they're taller than me. I have to stand like this. Good morning, everyone. It's definitely my pleasure to be here with you today. And let me just begin by thanking the Salvation Army for all of the work that you do over so many years. It wasn't that long ago I was at the Bell shelter and you gave me a tour and I had an opportunity to see the community that you built. And I think it's just a great example of the type of healing center that is needed to get our unhoused Angelinos back housed and back stable and eventually self-sufficient, because it was comprehensive and it included everything. And I also want to thank many of you around the room, because there's a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people who have been doing this work for years and years and years, sweating in the background, going back and forth with whatever politician was in office or whatever funding fad was going on, and you've had to navigate that. And I want to thank you for your work, and I want you to know also that I identify very much with that work for work that I did for many years in the community, running a nonprofit and having to go through a lot of the trials and tribulations that you go through on a day-to-day basis. And I hope I can always be in a situation to advocate for you and also to support you through those trials and tribulations. And boy, are we in the middle of one now. I don't know what to say from day to day. I wake up in the morning and say, what will happen from Washington? How Los Angeles will be focused on and picked on? We just don't know. But we do know, though, that this administration is coming in with possible massive change to the work that we do every day, bringing in an ideology that I don't believe supports what we do on a daily basis or views our population that we consider our neighbors in an entirely different way. So this issue of people being on our streets is what led to me making the difficult decision and gamble to leave Congress and to come back here and to address a problem that I had actually been trying to address on the street in the 90s in South Central, when nobody was that concerned about homelessness, because it was really just South Central and Skid Row. It hadn't mushroomed to be citywide. And what I saw happening in Los Angeles was, because it had mushroomed way away from the inner city and to more affluent areas, and then just the massive expansion of people on our streets, what I was worried about was I was having flashbacks from the 90s of what the response from politicians were about the crisis we had at that time, which was crack cocaine, the Crips and the Bloods, 1,000 homicides in South LA. And the only thing politicians really had to offer was sentencing laws that just incarcerated and criminalized people. And it didn't take much to see how that was going to, what that was going to lead to. And frankly, one of the reasons why we have people on the streets today is because of policies that were changed back then. And sometimes I think we get so immersed in what is happening on a day-to-day basis, we forgot how we got here. And everybody wants to pin it to mental health and the deinstitutionalization of mental health facilities. And yes, that was a contributing factor, but there were many more policy factors at play that resulted in where we are today. And it's not just affordability. Of course, it's the fact that I remember when LA was an affordable city, very affordable. I remember that. There's people here that weren't born when that was the case. But affordability is key. But the systematic shredding of the social safety net over time was also a very key, a very strong factor. In fact, I remember being in South LA when welfare reform was being debated, and we were adamantly opposed to that because there was nothing that was in place for after the 5 years when you were cut out. And I remember us saying that if this policy goes through, then homelessness is going to expand to include women and children on the street. That was so predictable. And so the compilation of all of these policies led to the people that are on the street today, and then we're left trying to figure out how to put these lives back together. Mass incarceration was a contributing factor. The foster care system was a contributing factor. We make children homeless by policy. When they're 18 or 21, we literally we know who they are, and we put them on the street. Veterans, We said if you are a veteran and you served your country and you need disability or you need benefits, well, we're going to count that as your income, and we're going to keep 3,000 vouchers in the county of Los Angeles, 3,000 unused vouchers, because we said the veterans don't qualify because they get veterans benefits. We said that if you don't have an ID, I can't give you housing. Well, you don't have an address, so how can you have an ID? And you need to prove your income to me. Well, you've been on the street for 5 years in a tent. How do you prove nothing? These were policies that were put in place without people taking into consideration the unintended consequences of those policies. So when it's about getting people off the street, it's not just the mere issue of getting them off the street. It's also addressing all of the policies that will continue to put people on the street at the same time. So I walk into, I get sworn in and go, oh boy. And I put the city in a state of emergency because I felt that street homelessness was an absolute emergency. People die on our streets, and we know 3 to 5 folks didn't wake up this morning. And that to me was an emergency. I set about trying to address street homelessness and didn't realize I was kind of wading into an ideological debate over should you address street homelessness or should you just focus on permanent housing. I think one of the consequences of that debate has been we focused on permanent housing, and of course I believe in permanent housing, but we didn't focus on interim housing because, for good reasons, we were worried that people would suffer in interim housing and they would never get out. The problem with that, though, is that I don't care how fast you expedite, and I've tried to get rid of every piece of red tape possible. It still takes a long time to build, and what do you do with the people in the meantime? So I was in New York on Friday because I went to New York 20 years ago looking when they were just kind of putting their system together, and they focused on interim. New York City has 80,000 homeless people. Do you know, and I was just, do you know that 97% of their homeless population is sheltered? 97%, where I think here we feel like that's impossible to shelter that many people. And then our folks don't want to go in the old-fashioned shelters, but over time the market has produced new and improved shelters where you do have some privacy and some semblance of normalcy. And so I think that ideological debate continues to play out in our city today with what I would characterize as a rigid interpretation of housing first. And the other part, and I bring a bias into this because I've had many lives before I ran for office. Well, one of them was working in healthcare. So I worked in a lot of LA hospitals. And one thing that I think is really missing from the system that makes me nuts is services. And that there is so many interpretations of what services are, and it always gets reduced to substance abuse and mental health. I'm worried about cancer. I'm worried about high blood pressure and diabetes. I'm worried about people having teeth. You use meth, it ruins your teeth. Everybody knows that. You go to a community-based organization that takes care of you in interim housing and passes you a meal that you can't eat. What are we going to do about that? Comprehensive health care needs to be central to getting people back healed. And I think that's lacking. And then the social service organizations, many of whom are represented here, everybody puts everything on you. You're supposed to solve it all. Of course, we're not going to give you any resources to do that, but just take care of everything. And so everybody goes about it in a different way. We need a new type of system, but we know that the threat that all of us face is that you have an administration and you have a party who has spent 3 to 4 years campaigning against housing first and wanting to return back to criminalization because it's your fault that you're homeless. It's because of decisions you made that led to you being that way. Now, that's that old conservative thinking. Of course, there's individual responsibility, but there's societal responsibility as well. And so I do worry about what is going on here. We've had a rupture of our joint powers agreement with LASA. And, just to be frank, I was never in love with that formation to begin with. But I think we had a system in place And instead of really trying to look at what is needed, we just continued the same system and kept putting different Band-Aids on it. We absolutely need to have transformative change. The question is, what is that transformative change? The question is, are we going to go back to dealing with homelessness on an individual basis? One of the things that we've done is that when we try to clear an encampment and house the people, we take everybody and put them in a motel, because we know that encampments are communities. And if you pick off individuals and just try to house individuals, you get a lot of resistance. We have found very little resistance when you bring the community as a whole. Bringing the community as a whole, putting people in motels is way too expensive. We have to come up with something that's more cost effective. But we also have to educate Los Angeles to the fact that you pay one way or another. So if you think it's expensive to house people, it is very expensive to leave people unhoused. All that you pay for, whether it's fires or healthcare or police. So we are at a crossroads locally as to what we are going to do. And I'm going to fight like hell, I just want you to know, because I'm worried about the direction that we're going in, and I'm worried that the creation of new bureaucracies is not going to solve the problem. We have to look at this from a comprehensive perspective. We have to stop people from coming in the system. We have to make sure we take care of them in a comprehensive way while they're in the system, and our end goal should be self-sufficiency. No public assistance, self-sufficiency. So just getting somebody in permanent housing is not enough. You can't say you succeeded if you get them in permanent housing and they're only there for 4 months. You have to follow them. That was the problem with welfare reform. We considered it a success to get you off the dole. We didn't really care what happened to you after that. We can't fall into that same thing. The goal has to be self-sufficiency. Otherwise, we'll just continue to cycle the same people. I better stop here because I could talk about this all day long. This is truly a passion. For me, it was my motivation, and I am going to stick with it because I just think that this, first of all, is the greatest country in the world. We are the richest country in the history of the world. Our state is the fourth largest economy on earth. We have one of the richest cities. We have 62 billionaires that live in our city. How is it that in Los Angeles in 2025, we have all of these people on the street? It is the humanitarian crisis of our time, and I won't stop until every Angelino has a roof over their head, they are appropriately taken care of, and we have a system that supports that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I believe we have time for a couple of questions, because obviously she has a very busy schedule. So are there any questions? And I will ask the first one then. Last summer, we toured Lafayette, the Salvation Army facility downtown. And at the time, I believe you were sort of figuring out, trying to address solutions in the Grants Pass decision. Where are we going to put everyone?
Right.
And I'm curious
Right.
to get your take on how Grants Pass has changed things, because we're having a panel on policy
Right.
changes later. I'm curious to see your opinion.
Right. I think, and I don't know, people could tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not necessarily on the ground. I don't think it's had a big effect here. I do work in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, so I hear about mayors around the city, around the country, and many mayors have taken advantage of Grants Pass from a punitive point of view. I don't think that has played out in our cities here. But here's the thing. Did you see the president's executive order on homelessness? That executive order, and this is what I'm worried about. This is the scenario that I'm worried about. I'm worried about those National Guard troops coming into Skid Row. I'm really worried about that. I'm worried about a alligator Alcatraz type facility being built here on federal land and then just sweeping Skid Row and going around town. Right now, they're in the business of hunting Latinos, which I think is absolutely egregious. The Supreme Court decision yesterday that said, the same Supreme Court that said you can't take race into account for college admission, but you can take race into account if you want to hunt people on the street.
Right. Yes, go ahead.
Are you planning on declaring the Sepulveda Basin a fire zone so the police and fire can enforce the camping laws?
Yeah, let me.
So that to remove the homeless from that area. And
Yeah.
please keep in mind, this is an LA 28 venue.
Oh, yes, I am extremely aware that it's an LA 28 venue. I don't know that I necessarily need to do that. What I can tell you is that it is absolutely an emergency to me, and we are going to clear out the Sepulveda Basin. That's going to be an interesting situation because I think, and all of us in here know, the unhoused folks, they're different populations. They're not all the same. And I think this is a particular population that might be a bit more challenging. I suspect that a number of them might be veterans because the level of skill and organization in the encampments that are there. But right now, my focus on the Sepulveda Basin is on the area that's closest to the homes in Encino. And that's what we're clearing out now. We are going to clear out the brush and we are going to have the people move. They absolutely have to move. The problem in the Sepulveda Basin is a danger to everybody that is unhoused and everybody that is housed because the number of fires that happen there almost on a daily basis, and the fact that if the winds kick up, those fires could spread into the residential area.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Philip Rosnick with the advisory board. I saw you take the Olympic flame last year in Paris. It was quite inspirational.
Thank you.
There's a lot of work to be done, both for the World Cup coming in 26 and then in 28. What are some of your thoughts and plans on trying to get people towards self-sufficiency versus, the age-old, let's put them on buses and get out of here, because it seems like a daunting task.
It is. It is a daunting.
How can we support you in this?
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is a daunting task. And I think that the main thing is that we need to come up with a better system of interim. We're not going to build permanent housing that quick. I did Executive Directive 1 that really blows away a lot of the red tape, and we have about 20,000 units in the pipeline. I did, that's 2 years ago. You know what I mean? I don't know how long it's going to take to get all that housing built. So where I think everybody could be helpful is we have to come up with a method of interim that can take people on a mass basis. Because look at it this way, if we don't figure it out, he's going to figure it out. Trust me, he will do that. That's what happened in Paris, by the way, because in Paris, they did not want to shuttle away the unhoused folks. The president of Paris, who was not a fan of the mayor, sound familiar? He just swept everybody away. He put them on buses and sent them to the countryside. So either we do it or it gets done to us.
All right, one more question. Lisa.
Yes, what is the city doing about creating more beds or making it easier for mental health facilities for it to be able to place them?
Well, that's a city-county partnership. All of us in here, I'm sure, voted for Proposition 1 last year. But see, it's a perfect example. We have the legislation and the funding in place. That election was last March. It takes a year to do the regulations, to begin to get the money on the street, which it's trickling in. But how long is it going to be before facilities are built? It takes a while. That's why we have to figure out what we do in the interim. I say Hilda Solis probably has taken the lead. She's built 3 facilities on the campus of USC Medical Center. And then Janice Hahn is building a facility at Norwalk. They're building it. It's still probably going to take 2 or 3 years. We have St. Vincent's Hospital right near here that's empty. It's used as a film location.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I know the mayor is quite busy with her schedule. Please join me in thanking her for her time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.